Thanks to everyone who has watched and liked this series of videos about how to mix live music. I'm glad they've been so popular and helpful. Perhaps they've got you mixing music for the first time. Well, we've received a number of good questions from our viewers, so I'm taking a break from filming some other new videos to help answer a selection of them. And I've split them into two broad categories. Questions relating to signal level and questions relating to signal routing. Both topics cover a lot of ground, and it's not surprising that most questions are based on these two subjects. So, we'll come back to signal routing in the next episode and just answer the variety of level and gain questions here. Praneeth has asked in episode 1, what do the markings -15 to +15 mean along the channels of a mixer? And what's the difference between -15, -10, -50 and +5 along all the faders? Well, dB, or decibel, is a measure of signal level, and is not an absolute value though, like volts or amps may be. Instead, it is a relative value and indicates what change of signal level will be expected. Decibel values use a logarithmic scale, which allows smaller numbers to be used to express a much broader variation in values. For example, if moving a fader from 0 to -10 reduces the power of the signal 10 times, moving from 0 to -20 will reduce the power of the signal 100 times, and moving to -30 1,000 times. Thinking not at all scientifically, but practically, an audio signal level change of 1 dB is the smallest step many people can notice if their ears are trained, though some people are more sensitive than others. So, if you see a marking of -15 on an EQ knob, it means you have about 15 steps of noticeable change available to be made for making those frequencies quieter. Then +15 will indicate you have about 15 steps of change available to increase the level. Of course, the 0 point indicates that there is no change applied to the signal level in the mixing desk. Take a look at episode 6 to learn more about gain structure and signal levels inside a mixing desk. Actually, there's another good question raised by a viewer of episode 6, Ocean Birds Music. If I'm correct, you get the best sound when the amp is at the max volume because you otherwise lose punch, definition, etc. Is that right? Well, it's almost right. The amp will work best when the input signal level is at the maximum allowed before distorting. And in some cases, to achieve that, particularly when the mixing desk has a high output level, you would need to turn the amp's input level down. But the same applies to mic preamps and mixing desks too. They sound best when the signal level is at the maximum permissible before distortion. To avoid hearing damage or discomfort, you may need to turn the level down somewhere in the sound system. So, decide what has the better sound quality and characteristics, your mixer or your amps, and turn down whichever one suits your system the best. Jumping ahead to episode 15, about faders and groups, we received an interesting comment from Anthony. He says, you should not be telling people to turn down the input gain if you need to bring the fader up to unity. You should be using the trim knob and not the gain knob. turning down the gain while raising the fader is only going to increase your signal to noise ratio. And he's kind of correct and wrong at the same time. On the one hand, turning down the gain while raising the fader will decrease the signal to noise, not increase it. But his sentiment is right because it can result in more audible noise, and we don't usually want that. Anthony is also correct that digital mixers such as TF series include a digital trim in their input section that can reduce the signal level without compromising on noise. But if you're using a regular analog mixer like the MGP series, then you need to strike a balance between what is technically best and what is artistically best. To create an exciting and interesting live music mix, you may need to make many fine adjustments to the faders during a performance, which would be much more accurate if the faders are kept between the -10 and +10 range. And sometimes to achieve that, you may choose to sacrifice a very small amount of sound quality. How to Mix Live Music, episodes 5 and 6, explain how to get the input gain technically correct. Chapter 15 is a little bit more focused on the art of mixing. And occasionally you may find that bending the rules creates better art. But not always. Our last question related to gain and level is from episode 24 about recording. Why does my MGP mixer record level lower than 0 dB? And why is the sound not clear and loud enough? Well, firstly, I suggest you check which audio output channel you are recording and check the recording level. You can do that on the mixer's LCD display. Press the USB button and check page 3. The recording source is either stereo or matrix 1 and 2. Then check the level of that source channel is set to an appropriate position. Boost it if necessary. Or, if it shouldn't be adjusted because it's also being used for a PA system, then press the USB button again to see page 2 on the LCD. Here you can adjust the record level and see the level meters. You could increase the level for the recording without affecting the PA system and keep an eye on the meters here. I recommend you try to keep the meters peaking between -6 and -18 without ever reaching 0, because at 0, the signal will start to distort. Well, that's all we've got time for right now. But like I said, I'll be back for another helpful Q&A session next time, where we'll mainly focus on signal routing, though there are a couple of additional topics. See you then.